This is certainly unusual. He had clearly escorted them back to the Gryffindor common room. Could it be that these stubborn youngsters had once again ventured out on their own to search the castle? Explain your findings in detail, Miss Granger. Now was not the time to dwell on trivial matters. Amostar steadied himself and asked directly. Whoa, it's like this, Professor Brain. Hermione was breathing heavily. There was no time now for a cup of tea. Pressing her dry lips together, she spoke in a hoarse but rapid voice. It was Harry. After returning to the common room, the three of us didn't go to our dormitories to sleep. Instead, we discussed that mysterious diary of riddles. At first, it was all trivial talk, but then Harry suddenly remembered something very important. What was it? Seeing Hermione's amber eyes widen, Amos quickly pressed for details. Earlier, when Harry was communicating with the diary, he accidentally heard it mention that 50 years ago, the student who died from the basilisk attack, her final death occurred in a bathroom. Go on, Miss Granger. Amos furrowed his brow, his voice betraying his excitement. So it was the hero phenomenon again. Remarkable coincidences always seem to find their way into one's hands. The third-floor bathroom, Hermione said decisively. There's always been a ghost there. We call her Moaning Myrtle. She is the student who died 50 years ago. From her, we got the clue. Harry opened the entrance to the chamber, and he and Ron went ahead to save Ginny. Whew, Harry sent me here to inform you. Amos let his shoulders relax and exhaled deeply, finally smiling. Let's go, Miss Granger. Let's bring that poor girl back. Chapter 82, Entering the Chamber. This is it, Professor. Hermione ran ahead, leading Amos to the girls' bathroom on the third floor. Amos had heard about this bathroom from fellow students during his own school days. A slightly unhinged female ghost lived there, claiming the room as her own territory. Whenever a student entered, she would shout and splash water at them. Over time, no one dared use the bathroom. After all, who wanted a cold shower while attending to personal matters? Standing at the entrance, Amos noted the trickle of water on the floor. The chamber's entrance had been hidden inside a girl's bathroom. One had to admit, Slytherin's thought process was rather peculiar. In truth, Amos realized he had misunderstood Salazar Slytherin. When Slytherin originally created the chamber's entrance, this room had been his private bath. Only later, over the centuries, did castle management convert it into a girl's bathroom for student use. You're here again? Oh, and a professor, too. As Amos followed Hermione inside, Moaning Myrtle was perched atop a stall door, happily humming. Spotting a professor entering, she immediately panicked and floated down. Amos had only a vague impression of this ghost. Curious, he studied her odd appearance for a moment, then his attention shifted to the thick pipe in front of the sink. Mulberry, are Harry and Ron still downstairs? Hermione asked anxiously. Apparently so. Burned. In front of a professor, Mulberry dared not be too brazen. Peering through the thick lens hidden in the bottom of its bottle, it carefully studied the handsome-looking professor while speaking with relish. No need to worry. I think your two friends will show up here very soon. Oh, I was just picking out toilets for them a moment ago. I have a question for you, Miss Mulberry. I hope you can answer. Amostar patted Hermione's shoulder, signaling her not to worry. His gaze returned to Mulberry. Though still polite, his tone carried an unmistakable edge of authority. If I'm not mistaken, the 3 attacks last semester were actually carried out by a controlled Miss Ginny Weasley. You've been in this lavatory the whole time. Surely you witnessed her opening the chamber, didn't you? You've known all along, Mulberry. Even through the ghost's faint silver glow, Hermione could see the malevolence in its eyes. Staring at it in disbelief, she shrieked in anger. Everyone worked tirelessly to find the chamber and the one who opened it, Mulberry. We even spent over a month brewing potions in this damp lavatory, and all the while you were watching us make fools of ourselves. Oh, Mulberry twirled before Amostar, a shy little smile on its face. You must understand me. I've been alone here, enduring the isolation and Peeves' torment. I've always wished for someone to keep me company. Hermione was nearly in tears. Because of Mulberry's selfish whims, Colin and Justin were forced to stay bedridden for half a semester. Harry endured endless glares, and Ginny's life was even at risk. I'm going to tell Professor McGonagall, Mulberry. You're going to be expelled for this. Hermione's words enraged Mulberry. Its chest ballooned as if filled with air. That Skurtzen It surged toward Hermione, ready to argue, but just 10 feet away, in front of Amasta, a swirling vortex of silver-black magic, moon-sized, materialized in its path. Mulberry recoiled instinctively, sensing the deathly aura at the vortex's core. The fear blurred its silver form. Ah, thud! After a piercing scream, Mulberry shot toward the ceiling, then plunged headfirst into a toilet, disappearing entirely. Professor Brain, you shouldn't have let it get away. Hermione's face flushed with indignation. She had no idea what this magic meant for a ghost. At this moment, there's no point in contending with a ghost, Miss Granger. Amasta moved to the center of the lavatory, standing before the dark pipe that reeked ominously from within. His gaze held admiration. Through his magical sight, he saw the power nodes sustaining the pipe entwined with the vast magical energies of the castle itself. Advanced magic follows rules. To break such magic, one must play by the caster's rules, or rely on sheer force. But few possess the power to challenge nature itself. For example, now, without Harry's Parseltongue to unlock the chamber's entrance, Amasta could only open the passage by uprooting the entire Hogwarts castle. Do we need to go down? Professor Brain? That basilisk? There could be danger below. Hermione's words were naive, but understandable. Facing the legendary founder Salazar Slytherin's chamber, created to eliminate impure bloodlines, even a second-year Muggle-born witch could hardly remain calm. Don't worry, Miss Granger. I'm here. Amasta withdrew his probing gaze. Exploring ancient wizarding relics was fascinating. Slytherin's opening spell alone deepened his understanding of rule-based magic linked to the environment. The pipe's inner walls were coated with slippery, sticky liquid. Sliding down directly would be unwise. Amasta considered this, then looked at the small witch trembling at the dark opening. My apologies, Miss Granger. What do you mean, Professor? Before Hermione could react, Amasta extended his long, fair-skinned right hand, gently resting it on her shoulder. Hermione bit her lip, face flushed. Before she could question further, Amasta's empty left hand lifted the hem of his robe and flicked it forward. Instantly, Hermione felt as if enveloped in a sheet of icy water. Darkness engulfed her vision, and to her shock, she realized her body and human form had vanished. She had become a floating, shadowy entity of near-spiritual substance, dark gray in color. What magic is this, Professor Brain? Though she didn't know how she could still speak, Hermione's voice rang out ethereal and echoing. Let's save your questions for another time, Miss Granger. We need to move quickly. Amos's voice, carried as a shadowy whisper, directly entered Hermione's mind. Immediately after, he led her in a sudden dash into the pipe. As they descended, Amos saw numerous smaller pipes branching off in all directions, but none as large as the one they were in. This pipe twisted and turned, looping in complex curves, steeply sloping downward. The humidity rapidly increased, and the temperature dropped sharply. In his unique form, Amos could see that he was guiding Hermione straight toward the bottom of the Black Lake. Chapter 83. At last! Professor, you can fly? After roughly 2 minutes of hurtling through the seemingly endless pipe, Amos and Hermione finally arrived in a dark stone tunnel. Hermione had just returned to solid form from her phantom state, still struggling with dizziness and nausea, yet she couldn't suppress a gasp of astonishment. In her understanding, even wizards with remarkable abilities required brooms or flying carpets to achieve flight. Magic alone granting the power to fly? Completely unheard of. Heh, quite obvious. Amos glanced at a shattered rat skull beneath their feet, exhaled, and spoke in a relaxed tone. Using the glow from the tip of Professor Brain's wand, Hermione, still reeling from the revelation that a wizard could fly unaided, noticed that the floor of this tomb-like stone tunnel was littered with the bones of small animals. She fought to suppress her scream, but fear made her body tremble weakly. She had to cling to Amos's robes just to stay upright. For Amos, in all the magical ruins he had explored, a floor covered in pale bones was relatively ordinary. Even if they were human, it would scarcely frighten him. Come on, Miss Granger. We don't have much time to waste. His tone was calm as he let the young witch clutch his robes, moving steadily through the tunnel. The air was thick with the stench of decaying flesh and mud. The tunnel, aged and imperfectly sealed, dripped murky water from the ceiling. Hermione shivered each time a droplet fell, unable to stop her body from trembling. She nearly relied entirely on Amos for support, unable to think about Ginny, Harry, or Ron's current predicament. Professor Brain, that's rounding a dark curve, a massive silhouette appeared, making Hermione scream. Before she could fully voice her panic, Amos, just half a step ahead, reacted with lightning speed. He raised his wand, leaving a faint afterimage in the air. The glowing tip erupted into fierce fire, rumbling. Like an aerial bomb detonating, the spacious tunnel was instantly filled with a rotating golden fire tornado. Sweeping forward, it obliterated everything in its path, the water puddles, the submerged bones, and the mud and moss clinging to the walls, vaporizing them completely. In the darkness, Hermione's tousled curls whipped around as if she were standing at the edge of a volcano, staring in awe at a golden sun rising from molten lava. Gurgle! The scorching heat forced Hermione to swallow repeatedly, struggling to resist the rapidly rising temperature. She stared in disbelief at Professor Brain's gray hair illuminated red by the flames, suddenly unsure whether the basilisk or the professor was the greater danger. After 30 seconds of silence, Amos finally lowered his wand, extinguishing the magical fire. He led Hermione through the smoking, scorching tunnel toward the massive shape ahead. Before them lay a roughly 30-foot-long snakeskin, charred black with golden flames still clinging to it. A single touch caused it to crumble like rotted wood. Professor, Hermione panted, giving her assessment, this is the basilisk's shed skin? Amos nodded. Estimating the basilisk's staggering size, he spoke no further, continuing forward without pause. After a few seconds of stunned hesitation, Hermione finally came to her senses. She hurried to catch up with Professor Brain, once again grabbing the fluttering hem of his robes and following closely in his footsteps. The two of them wound through tunnel after tunnel, each turn sending shivers down Hermione's spine. Now she finally understood why Professor Brain's defense against the dark arts practical classroom maze had looked the way it did. Keep your eyes on the ground. Don't look up, he instructed. After roughly 10 minutes, Amostar, who had begun sensing fluctuations in magical energy and hearing faint rumbling sounds, suddenly stopped at a corner. He turned back and spoke to Hermione, who could no longer stay calm. Then, raising his wand in front of him, the swirling vortex in his violet eyes began to rotate slowly, like a grinding millstone. A minute later, after passing the final corner, Amostar and Hermione found themselves before a solid wall. Carved into the wall and curling to either side were two stone serpent statues with piercing green eyes. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently. In the cool air, faint sounds of shrill cries and crashing rocks could be heard, suggesting a fierce struggle was taking place in a nearby room glowing with a dim light. Draw your wand, Miss Granger. We're almost there. Hermione, realizing she had been traveling empty-handed, quickly obeyed. Sorry, Professor Brain, I didn't notice, she whispered, blushing as she hurriedly pulled her wand from her robe pocket. 3 months had passed since Christmas, since she had returned to Hogwarts. Though the journey had been fraught with complications, Amostar finally stood inside the legendary chamber of Slytherin, rumored to exist for a millennium. The chamber was long and dimly lit. On either side, numerous stone pillars carved with entwining serpents rose high, supporting a ceiling that dissolved into darkness above. The green, mysterious mist swirling through the room cast long, eerie shadows. At the far end stood a towering statue as tall as the room itself, depicting an elderly Salazar Slytherin. Once handsome, Slytherin's dangerous magical experiments had left him in old age resembling a frail, stooped monkey. Ginny lay motionless at the statue's base. A few steps away, Ron was slumped over, a stone pressing on his back, his arms marked by bites, and his tattered robes soaked in blood. Amostar noted that Ron's wand appeared to have broken in two again. Harry, further ahead, dodged massive stones swept aside by the steel-like tail of the basilisk. He held a fairy-styled sword in one hand with a pudding-stained sorting hat stuffed into his pocket. Still saving tricks for last, Dumbledore, I see. Amostar immediately recognized the colorful bird flying above, fiercely pecking at the basilisk's terrifying head. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix. He glanced at the shadow behind a stone pillar and watched with keen interest as the basilisk, its lantern-sized eyes blinded by pecks, writhed in the chamber. A smile of satisfaction spread across his face. Ron and Ginny, Professor, please help Harry. The basilisk, enormous and gleaming with greenish metallic scales, blocked Hermione from reaching her friends. Her heart ached, and with tears in her voice, she pleaded urgently for Professor Brain to act. Finally, noticing the new visitor in the chamber, Harry rolled forward just in time to dodge the basilisk's crushing iron-like tail and shouted anxiously, "Professor Brain, I'll hold the basilisk off. Hurry and get Ron and Ginny to the hospital. Ron's been bitten by its fangs." "This child," Amasta muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose in exasperation, a mix of amusement and disbelief on his face. "Has he lost his mind from getting hit by those stones?" Chapter 84, Words on the Release. The editor informed me that the book will go live tomorrow at noon. Before it's officially released, I want to share the current stats. At the time of writing this note, the book has 10,734 bookmarks, 444 investments, over 1,700 followers, 2,174 recommendation votes, and about 540 monthly votes. In the light novel category, it will launch in the 4th round of AI recommended placement. For someone like me, a struggling writer who's written over 1 million words and only earned 200 yuan in royalties, this is an unprecedented achievement. I sincerely thank everyone who bookmarked the book, followed it, voted, gave monthly votes, tipped, or provided thoughtful reviews. Without you, this book might have turned out very differently. There are regrets too. To reach the Sanjiang tier for fanfiction, one usually needs around 2,200 followers. It seems my book won't make it. Honestly, the light novel genre is currently one of the most competitive on Kidian. Before the release, I need to clarify a few things. I read almost every comment from readers carefully. Some questioned that certain second-year storylines felt dumbed down. Well, that view isn't entirely wrong. When I initially sketched out the story, I rushed, and some plot points couldn't fully achieve perfect logical coherence. Additionally, I'm very much a novice writer. I lack experience and am not naturally gifted. Those who become online literature stars from a single work are limited by personal talent. Still, I've learned a lot from readers' comments, and as the story progresses, glaring errors should gradually decrease. Regarding power levels, the original work's combat strength and destructive power can feel painful for readers accustomed to Chinese web novels. For example, abandoning the Elder Wand, why is Dumbledore still so powerful? Is it just because he knows more spells? That's not enough. If Harry and Dumbledore cast the disarming charm simultaneously, whose would be stronger? Clearly, Dumbledore's. But why? Is it because he understands the spell better? And how should that deeper understanding be represented? In short, to have clear power distinctions, another system is necessary. This book introduces the concept of mana reserves and differentiates spells as standard or non-standard to reflect a wizard's mastery of a spell. One reader noted that many feats in Harry Potter's world would be impossible even in a high magic universe. It's like high-dimensional powers reduced to a lower-dimensional plane. I find that reasonable and interesting. Later in the story, combat depictions will gradually rise to mid-tier magical standards. Otherwise, the climactic fight between Harry and Voldemort would just be one casting a killing curse, while the other throws fiendfire, rather dull. Because of the narrative perspective, the story currently follows the original book fairly closely. Future arcs will retain the major event per school year structure. However, in my approach, original content will increase in later years. For instance, the third-year plot will see significant changes. I believe my ideas are exciting and coherent. If readers expect a strict adherence to the original, I'm afraid that's not my goal. The original book serves as the main plot line. I'm crafting a secondary plot line that will eventually intertwine with it. The challenge is merging these two lines without logical flaws. That will determine the success of this book. Regarding the female lead, many readers are curious and have even said Hermione's role determines whether they follow the book. Truthfully, I haven't decided yet. Making Hermione the lead would be convenient and easy to write, but I'm not entirely comfortable with it. Perhaps the story will reveal whether she truly fits the role. As for the secondary plotline, it will touch on figures and objects from British mythology. I researched extensively, but the sources were chaotic and confusing. Many Harry Potter fanfictions have explored this area, often with highly professional results. If I strictly followed canon, I might introduce errors and lack originality. So after some struggle, I decided to only borrow names and basic concepts. sometimes diverging from them. Otherwise, the story's own setting will prevail, and I hope readers view these elements through this book's perspective. When the book launches at noon tomorrow, over 10,000 words will be released at once. It's not much, but please understand. Year end has been hectic. It's already 11 p.m. I've just put the kids to bed, finished household chores, and am writing this release note in my small room. Tomorrow morning, I head back home. After the Lantern Festival next year, there will be more updates. At that time, I'll set an achievable up schedule based on the book's performance. For now, I apologize for the delay. I sincerely ask for your support with subscriptions. I admit I'm a bit sensitive. I check stats dozens of times a day. One recommendation vote can lift my spirits for hours. One last thing. Some readers mention that the protagonist's personality in the first 3 chapters contrasts strongly with their behavior upon entering Hogwarts, making it feel like a caretaker story. I assure you, I'm not writing a caretaker narrative. The personality contrast reflects different environments. At home, at school, or at work, people naturally behave differently. Perhaps my depiction wasn't perfect, but that's the idea. That's about all I wanted to say. I'm exhausted and can't stay up any longer. Wishing everyone a happy Lunar New Year in advance. Chapter 85, Confusion. What are you talking about, Harry? Before Amostar could speak, Hermione shouted anxiously, "Get out of the way, Harry! Professor Brain can handle that basilisk!" Amostar touched his nose and looked at Hermione with a faint smile. It seemed that showing a bit of his strength had made the young witch put a great deal of faith in him. Hermione's warning snapped Harry out of his daze. Clutching the sword, its hilt set with a dazzling, egg-sized ruby, he rolled and scrambled out of the basilisk's frenzied attack range. Whoa! Professor Brain, please save Ron and Ginny. They're still alive. Realizing that, aside from Headmaster Dumbledore, the most powerful professor in the school was right before him, Harry felt his strength drain from his body as if magically pulled away. Just as he stumbled, Hermione caught him deftly, keeping him upright. Don't worry, Potter. No one's dying tonight. Seeing that Ginny still had a faint pulse of life, Amostar relaxed slightly. His eyes fell on the sword in Harry's hand, and he suddenly remembered a legendary item belonging to Godric Gryffindor. After a moment's thought, he hesitated before asking, Potter, this sword is... Fawkes brought me the sorting hat. Harry panted, catching his breath. I found this sword inside the hat. It must have been placed there by Headmaster Dumbledore. Then it suddenly fell and hit me on the head. Amostar nodded knowingly, piecing together the truth from Harry's jumbled account. Though curious about the famous weapon, he knew this was hardly the time for research. Move away, Fawkes. Don't get caught in my spell. While the 3 of them spoke briefly, Dumbledore's phoenix still battled the basilisk midair. Hearing Amostar's warning, Fawkes let out a clear, intelligent cry, leaving a trail of brilliant light as it swooped down toward the fallen Ron, lowering its head to focus on the torn wound on his arm. Clang! A piercing whistle, like an arrow released from a bow, cut through the air. Harry and Hermione saw Professor Brain wave his wand lightly. Several large stones silently transformed into metal spears as thick as oak trees. Their dark, gleaming surfaces sliced the air and instantly formed an unbreakable, massive cage around the enormous basilisk. Rumble! Clang! The basilisk thrashed violently against the metal barriers. The ground shook like an earthquake, and stones rained down, but the translucent magical barrier surrounding Amostar protected them. No debris touched them. Amostar studied the defiant creature, then flicked his wrist again. A brief glimmer ran along the metal framework. Bang! The basilisk dared not strike so recklessly this time. Each time its hard scales touched the cage, golden flames erupted from the seemingly cold spears. This magical fire, born of intense heat, could melt magical resistance. Though the basilisk had endless stamina, it soon slumped to the ground, coiling itself into a tight circle, too wary to move again. Was this the power of someone who could already face Dumbledore back in 5th year? Harry gaped, unable to believe how effortlessly Professor Brain, with the help of Dumbledore's phoenix, had contained a creature he had nearly risked his life to confront. Ron, Hermione, having already shaken off her shock, ran forward with tears streaming, unable to restrain her worry any longer. Professor Brain, the bird, it's crying, she sobbed. Is Ron. Harry's body trembled. his face paling. He stared at Ron, who had just been groaning faintly on the ground. His lips quivered. No matter what, he could not believe his friend was gone. You two don't need to worry. Amasta quickly stepped forward. He flipped the pale, unmoving Ron over and examined the charred flesh on his arm. Under the phoenix's tears, blue smoke spiraled up. Fox is a phoenix, and its tears have extremely powerful healing properties. However, Amasta's gaze shifted to Ginny, whose chest rose with only the faintest movement. Miss Weasley's condition is more serious. She urgently needs professional, effective treatment. You two should escort them to Madame Pomfrey in the infirmary immediately. Chapter 85, Rescue and Confrontation. When Harry realized that both Ron and Ginny were still alive, it was as if someone had pulled him out of water. He gasped for air, and in those few seconds he broke out in more cold sweat than during his earlier battle with the basilisk. Amostar conjured 2 stretchers, guiding Ron and Ginny's bodies to float onto them. Then he turned to Hermione, whose eyes were still brimming with tears. I'll stay here and watch the basilisk. Once you've taken Ginny and Ron to the school infirmary, go and inform Professor McGonagall about what happened. I imagine she'll faint with worry when she realizes 4 students have suddenly disappeared. But Hermione didn't object to Ta's plan. Her concern was the long, winding tunnel they had come through. How are we supposed to get back, Professor? We can't go through that passageway again. Fawkes perched on Ron's chest and gave a soft cry, but Ta shook his head. No need to trouble you, Fawkes. If possible, I'd like you to inform Principal Dumbledore. Unfortunately, I'm afraid his vacation time will have to be cancelled. The phoenix tilted its head, scrutinizing Ta with its gem-like eyes. After a moment, it nodded almost humanly and vanished in a burst of fiery light. Then it's your turn, Ta said to Harry and Hermione. With a wave of his wand, a sudden gust transformed Harry into a ghostly, intangible form. He flew uncontrollably toward the entrance of the chamber. Professor Ta! By the time Harry realized what was happening, he had already emerged near the chamber's exit. He anxiously called out to the rapidly receding Ta. Watch out for Voldemort. It's there. Ta exhaled slowly, turning to face the basilisk coiled on the floor, its life nearly spent. A satisfied smile spread across his face. Finally, after so many long nights and efforts, this ancient creature was in his hands. The basilisk, a creature that could live for centuries, before him had already lived over 1,000 years while maintaining immense vitality. Surely, Salazar Slytherin had conducted numerous mysterious and intricate experiments on it. Ta paced to the cage, glaring at the basilisk's bloodshot eyes, muttering in annoyance, hoping that when Carcass inspected it, he wouldn't nitpick and deduct his commission. Looks like. As Ta prepared to adjust the creature's massive form, a young, polite voice suddenly spoke from behind a pillar. You seem very fond of it, Professor Ta. I inherited this basilisk from my great ancestor. If you don't mind, I can gift it to you. Foolish. Without a hint of surprise, Ta smiled and turned to see a tall, black-haired student leaning against the stone pillar, Tom Riddle. Take it from me, and this basilisk is mine too. Chapter 86, Dismemberment. The chamber, bathed in green light, fell into long mist silence, like the cold air thick with suffocating pressure. The basilisk seemed to regain some courage. It lifted its head, using its keen magical senses to detect the direction of its great master's descendant. Its crimson tongue flicked nervously, revealing its unease, yet the massive magical presence a few steps away prevented it from acting recklessly. Amos Ta and Tom Riddle regarded each other silently. Both were wizards capable of perceiving truth through magical sensing. No words were spoken, yet each could glimpse the other's strengths and intentions. There's no need for such formality, Professor Ta. We are friends, not enemies, aren't we? Finally, Riddle spoke. Not yet fully restored, he was clearly at a disadvantage. His smile was controlled, his tone soft and polite, as if addressing a revered teacher. I've heard from Harry Potter about your past and your return to Hogwarts, Professor Ta. Without a doubt, you are no ordinary mediocrity. We are the unique elites in the eyes of the great Salazar Slytherin, and now Hogwarts and the wizarding world are dominated by hypocrites and fools who merely polish appearances. The world needs change, and only we. Mr. Voldemort, Ta interrupted, tilting his head. His penetrating gaze dissected the soul core of the Horcrux before him. His wand spun lazily at his fingertips as he said calmly, How many times do you think I've faced your Horcrux? Riddle fell silent, surprise flashing across his face. The cunning in his eyes shifted to the predatory gleam of a wolf hunting its prey. His scrunched nose twisted his refined features into something vicious. What do you mean? Abandoning all pretense, Riddle glared at Ta. A Horcrux? What is that? What is that? You faced my original self, so you should know. Voldemort is the greatest wizard ever. His power is beyond what fools could imagine. Ta pressed his lips together, seeing more than raw evil or threatening magical power in the boy's ghostly form. He saw a soul shimmering with color. What a marvelous thing. He recalled the fragmented souls he encountered while destroying the crown, entirely consumed by endless desire and darkness. Those fragments were impossible to communicate with, only capable of luring life through seductive magic. Amostar Brain, you've dealt with Dumbledore before. You should know he's a petty, narrow-minded man. He views any gifted young witch or wizard with suspicion, scheming to destroy their talents. I can guarantee you, one day Dumbledore will come after you. Oh, he already has, hasn't he? Amosta's gaze, heavy with quiet pressure, made Riddle feel as though a lump had lodged in his throat. With his lips curling and speaking in a rapid, tense tone, Riddle continued. The defense against the dark arts position, Dumbledore persuaded you to take it, didn't he? Everyone knows the class has already been cursed by the Dark Lord himself. He intended to use it to take you out. Take me away from here, Brain. Once I've restored all my power, I'll help you deal with Dumbledore. Amasta had never faced the second Dark Lord directly, but this Tom Riddle before him was certainly a cunning opportunist, skilled at exploiting any opening. So, this diary, it was the first Horcrux you ever created, wasn't it? A soft statement from Amasta left Riddle momentarily speechless. It seemed he realized that no matter what he said, this young Slytherin prodigy had already decided he would be destroyed. Emotions spring from the soul, and a Horcrux, this vile magic, strips away reason and sentiment first, leaving a person a madman ruled by desire. Tap tap. As Amasta stepped forward, the purple in his eyes began to fade visibly. Under the dense, awe-inspiring power that could make a Hungarian horntail shiver, the air around him twisted as if the chamber itself were scorched asphalt on a midsummer day. A rumble shook the vast, empty chamber. The basilisk inside its cage hissed in fear, retreating its head into its coiled body as if sensing the fate that had befallen Tom Riddle. The statue of Salazar Slytherin, level with the ceiling, silently observed Amasta Brain and Tom Riddle. For a millennium, it had stood alone, and now it would witness a Slytherin either destroying his own bloodline or preserving its true glory. I've seen emotions in your soul that only a normal person would have: fear, hatred, loneliness, and a host of other curious little feelings. Wait. Riddle, pale and trembling, felt the faint silver mist surrounding him being forced back into his ethereal form. Immobilized, he struggled to speak through gritted teeth. You crave power, don't you? We're the same sort. The Slytherin secrets left in this castle aren't just one, Professor Brain. I'm willing to share the ancient, immensely powerful magic he left behind. If only you. Ugh. He could say no more. Amasta, expressionless, finally stepped directly before him. Riddle watched in terror as the young professor, whose presence had unsettled him from the moment he learned of it, began to radiate a faint light. Slowly he raised a hand, fingertips inching toward Riddle's forehead. Ugh! Ignoring Riddle's anguished whimpers, Amasta's fingers, hand, arm, and entire body gradually merged into Riddle's form. The diary in Riddle's pocket floated into the air, pages rustling violently as though caught in a storm, black smoke curling from its leaves. In the empty chamber, the scene was dark, eerie, and foreboding. A brilliant flash filled Amasta's vision. When he came to, he found himself in a strange, alien space. The vast expanse seemed almost like outer space. Gray, violent winds, tangible and sharp, filled the void. Each gust contained immense, malevolent, magical power, surely the protective enchantments Voldemort had placed on the diary and the Horcrux itself. Whoosh. Boom. The faint glow surrounding Amasta surged, forming an oval barrier of magic around him. The relentless gray winds struck the reddish-hued shield. Opposing magical forces collided, erupting into bursts of light that made Amasta feel as though he stood within a raging inferno. Surveying the space, he soon sensed an anomaly to his front right. There, at the heart of this gray world, a black and white radiance pulsed continuously, casting ominous magical energy outward in every direction. Ah, there you are. Amasta smiled faintly. He retrieved a glass vial from his pocket, adjusted his collar with calm precision, and walked toward it with measured steps. Chapter 87, The Chamber Within the Chamber, Part 1. Half an hour later, Riddle's presence had completely vanished. The diary that housed his soul lay scattered across the floor, utterly devoid of magic. Each page bore jagged, sharp-edged holes, as if forcibly gouged with a knife. The cage Amos had conjured had disappeared, and the basilisk left behind by Slytherin was nowhere to be seen. Dumbledore's expression was solemn as he strode across the steps of the chamber's entrance. His purple traveling cloak flowed behind him like a regal cape. Harry followed, panting, speaking rapidly as he tried to explain something. When Dumbledore finally saw Amos standing unharmed at the foot of the Slytherin statue, a trace of relief softened his face, though his steps remained urgent. "Ah, you arrived quickly, Headmaster Dumbledore. Oh, and of course, Potter." Amos withdrew his gaze from the statue and turned with a faint smile. "It's truly a relief to see you safe, Amos," Dumbledore said warmly as he approached. He seemed about to say more, but was drawn to the diary on the floor. He picked up the tattered pages, his deep blue eyes scanning the shredded fragments. "Incredible," Dumbledore murmured. "No doubt. Hogwarts has never seen such gifted witches and wizards in my long career. Oh, and that includes you, Amos. Truly exceptional, in terms of magical talent alone." Harry looked confused. He glanced around, but aside from themselves, there were no visible creatures or traces of memories in the chamber. "Professor Ta, what happened to Voldemort and the Basilisk? Where did they go?" Amos' smile shifted to one of regret. He looked at the dust-covered Harry and said, "The basilisk struggled fiercely. The cage I conjured couldn't hold it. I had no choice but to reduce it to ashes. As for the evil magical artifact containing the Horcrux, it seemed intent on saving its master's servant. It leapt from behind a pillar to ambush me while I dealt with the basilisk," Amos shrugged lightly. "I panicked for a moment and used a very powerful spell, so it disappeared as well." Harry's breath caught. Amos's explanation made sense, yet something felt off. After all, this was Slytherin's legacy, a basilisk that had spawned countless terrifying legends over 1,000 years, and a Horcrux created by Voldemort himself. How could Amos's words make it seem as simple as killing a goblin? Hearing Amos's account, Dumbledore, who had been studying the diary intently, raised his head. He shook his silver eyebrows, and a peculiar glint appeared in his deep blue eyes. "In any case, Amos," Dumbledore said, slipping the diary into his pocket, a genuine smile on his face, "I must thank you. During the few hours I was away from the school, you fulfilled the duties of headmaster in my stead. I am truly relieved you saved Ginny Weasley. Otherwise, I'd have no idea how to explain it to Arthur and Molly. You protected Harry and his friends from the basilisk and Voldemort's machinations, tearing away the shadow that hung over the students all year." Dumbledore sniffed heavily, his voice filled with emotion. "If it weren't for the fact that you've already graduated, I would say a special award for outstanding contribution would be the perfect recognition for your courage and bravery." Coughing slightly at the torrent of praise, Amos pressed his lips together, a hint of modesty in his gesture. Then he gestured toward Harry. "You flatter me, Headmaster Dumbledore. In truth, if it weren't for Harry's sharp perception in discovering the chamber's entrance, none of this would have been so straightforward." "Of course," Dumbledore said with a warm smile toward the flushed young wizard. "Just as you safeguarded the Philosopher's Stone from Voldemort last year, your intelligence and bravery put many seasoned and esteemed wizards, myself included, to shame. Harry, I am certain that if Lily and James were still here, they would be proud of you." Harry's mouth opened slightly, his mind still full of questions. Why had Fawkes appeared during his struggle with the basilisk? How had he obtained the sword from the Sorting Hat already in Dumbledore's possession? And what about the diary? Yet he asked none of them. Dumbledore's words pressed on his chest like a heavy stone, leaving him breathless. The green fire in the chamber, reflecting the same hue as his eyes, provided cover for his emotions, making the tears in his eyes harder to detect. "Yeah, if they were still here," Amasta shifted his gaze and continued staring at the massive black void that had appeared on the stone-carved face. Dumbledore, sensing the moment, stepped forward a few paces, leaving Harry behind. Standing beside Amasta, he followed his gaze toward the gaping hole. His long, silver beard swaying slightly seemed to catch the faint light as he mused aloud. "You think there's something in there, don't you, Amasta?" "Just a feeling that something's off, Headmaster Dumbledore." Amasta didn't look at Dumbledore. His eyes flickered with a hard-to-read light. In truth, he hadn't sensed anything inherently wrong about the black void itself. What sparked his curiosity, what made him determined to explore it, was the memory he had reclaimed. That basilisk. It emerged from that very place after answering Voldemort's call. Harry, emerging from his sorrowful silence, answered their unspoken questions. Dumbledore nodded, acknowledging the truth, and with a probing gaze looked down at Amasta. After a long pause, he said calmly, "This ancient castle hides countless fascinating secrets, Amasta. Even as its headmaster, having read the notes of every predecessor, I may know less about Hogwarts than the Weasley twins. If you feel it's necessary, I can accompany you to see for yourself." Amasta inclined his head slightly, smiling in thanks. "I'm curious, Headmaster Dumbledore, that Salazar Slytherin would leave a basilisk in such a hidden chamber, supposedly to purge non-pureblood students, but that hardly seems the mark of a wizard of his caliber in both spirit and vision." A streak of light slid across Dumbledore's half-moon spectacles. "Reasonable and rational judgment, Amasta? Since that's the case," he clearly suspected something, but chose not to reveal it. Raising his elder wand, he swept it decisively. Immediately, the entire chamber trembled violently. Rubble and dust fell like a storm. Confused, Harry hastily shielded his forehead to prevent debris from striking his eyes. Within seconds, the tremors subsided. Harry, dusting off the layer of gray from his robes, looked ahead and froze in astonishment. Before Dumbledore and Amasta, a staircase had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, rising straight toward the towering, dark stone-carved face. Rough-hewn and dim in color, it soared at least 200 feet, like a pillar piercing the heavens. Harry clicked his tongue. Turning a small stone into a step was trivial for someone with 2 years of formal magical education, but creating a staircase of such magnitude, even if he had drained every ounce of magical energy from himself, he couldn't have produced so much power. Chapter 88, The Chamber, Within the Chamber, Part 2. Dumbledore and Amasta reached an unspoken consensus. They would enter the massive void within Slytherin's stone face to explore. But a slight disagreement arose regarding Harry's presence. Dumbledore seemed to believe that whatever the great founder Salazar Slytherin had left behind, guarded by a basilisk, was no simple matter. The dangers within the chamber could be unimaginable, and Harry, still a minor, lacked the capacity to face unknown perils. "No one is born ready to confront everything, Headmaster Dumbledore." Amasta glanced at Harry, who looked a little dejected, and said with meaning, "To help young witches and wizards grow quickly, they must be given more opportunities to be tested." In the end, Dumbledore heeded Amasta's reasonable advice. "You must promise me," he turned to Harry solemnly, "if danger arises and we command you to retreat, you will follow our orders?" "I promise, Headmaster Dumbledore." Although Dumbledore's words slightly bruised Harry's pride, the thought of venturing into an unknown chamber with two powerful wizards exhilarated him. Deep down, he had full confidence that with Dumbledore and Amasta by his side, no threat could harm him. Not even 10 Voldemorts could manage it. As Dumbledore and Amasta ascended the staircase, Harry grinned secretly. Though it was late and he had already endured a legendary battle tonight, his spirits were high. But that exhilaration ended abruptly the moment he stepped into the mouth of the void. The passageway inside was not as winding or long as they had imagined. However, the floor was littered with the bones of countless animals, many times more than the stone tunnel they had traversed after descending the pipe. Every step caused the weathered bones to crunch into dust beneath their feet. The deeper they went, the stronger the metallic tang of blood became, mingling with the scent of decay from the bones littering the floor. Harry noticed that many of the rats' skulls still had patches of gray, blood-stained scalp attached, and there were piles of spider legs stacked like tiny hills. Ugh! For some reason, Dumbledore let out a heavy sigh. When Amos cast him a probing glance, he simply shook his head and said nothing further. The three of them rounded a corner and followed a path cleared by the basilisk's movements for nearly half a mile. Gradually, the tunnel's appearance began to change. Golden torches spaced roughly 30 feet apart lined the walls on either side. The steady heat they radiated dried the damp stone, leaving the floor crisp and clean. The air grew fresh. The bones vanished, and even dust and cobwebs were nowhere to be seen. Harry felt as though this section could rival the castle corridors maintained by Filch himself. Tsk-tsk. Amos stopped before one of the torches, staring at the flickering flame with genuine admiration. Extravagant goblin fire, Slytherin, truly extravagant. Finally free from the sea of bones, Harry exhaled in relief, only to hear Amos muttering in awe, his gaze fixed on Dumbledore, silently seeking an explanation. Goblin fire is eternal fire, immensely rare because it never extinguishes, Dumbledore said, surveying the countless torches with appreciative eyes. Creating such fire consumes vast amounts of magical energy. To my knowledge, no one has ever produced this many eternal flames at once. Harry drew in a sharp breath. He finally understood the value of these bronze torches, but he felt a twinge of irritation. He could detect faint praise for Slytherin in the tones of Dumbledore and Amos. As the founder of the house Harry least liked, and the one whose chamber had caused him so much trouble this year, he could hardly feel positively towards Salazar Slytherin. Maybe Gryffindor's even better, Harry muttered under his breath. The torchlight glinted off Dumbledore's silver brows and beard. Hearing Harry's grumble, he chuckled softly, extinguished the glow at his wand tip, and stepped ahead of the group, leading the way. The tunnel widened gradually, ending in a steady, bright light. Amos tensed, gripping his wand, and followed quickly. As they approached, the chamber's deepest secret finally revealed itself. It was a massive cavern, roughly the size of 3 or 4 Quidditch pitches. From its ceiling, over 300 feet above, a forest of stalactites hung, and massive, rough-hewn circular pillars jutted out at irregular intervals. Arranged in precise order, the pillars' colors matched those of Hogwarts, as if they were supporting the entire castle. Absolutely insane. The wind swept through the cavern, carrying a mysterious, almost historical chant of the ages. Amos scanned the walls. The goblin fire torches placed at regular intervals murmured in astonishment. Their constant light illuminated the cavern like daylight, while the immense magical energy they radiated disrupted all detection spells. Unbelievable. Just how much power Slytherin must have possessed to be so lavish, Amos murmured. No wonder the basilisk survived a millennium. In such an environment, any creature could gain an extra 30 or 50 years of life. Harry, lacking a true understanding of the difficulty in creating goblin fire, couldn't fully grasp Amos's astonishment. Still, the cavern, full of jagged stone spires and stalactites steeped in the silent grandeur of time, left him speechless. Yes, the great Salazar Slytherin. Dumbledore, equally awed, voiced his own wonder. Though I am more curious about Slytherin's purpose in building this chamber. Amos nodded and looked back at Harry, who was marveling at the cavern's artistry, issuing a warning. From the looks of it, Potter, whatever is hidden in the chamber within this chamber is likely to be extraordinary. Stay alert. Harry nodded nervously, but his curious gaze continued darting around. He studied the uneven ground, noting the deep gullies and jagged black stone spires. Suddenly his expression froze. His eyes widened as he stared in a particular direction, and once he confirmed what he was seeing, his face went pale, and he shouted in alarm, "Headmaster Dumbledore! Professor Breen! There's a person over there!" Chapter 89, The Chamber Within the Chamber, Part 3. As they drew closer to the figure, Harry's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. His earlier panic was unfounded. What he had seen wasn't a living person at all, but a remarkably lifelike statue. It was a statue of Salazar Slytherin, but unlike the ancient, worn, almost candlelit figure in the outer chamber, this sculpture depicted him in his youth. Seated on a stone chair, back resting against the support, elbows on the armrests, his chin slightly raised, his gaze was sharp and assessing, a faint scowl between his brow ridges. The statue's eyes were set with black gemstones, flickering with a fiery glow that made it seem alive. From every angle, it felt as though the young Slytherin himself was watching. Even Harry had to admit that the intricate craftsmanship, down to the strands of hair, attested to Slytherin's exceptional appearance. The elegant robes only accentuated his commanding presence. In life, he must have been truly extraordinary. Yet no matter how realistic, Slytherin had long vanished in the currents of time, and this magnificent statue was, at the end of the day, just stone. After paying their respects to the founder, Amasta and Dumbledore quickly moved past the statue toward a stone door behind it, far grander than the castle's main gates. This must be Slytherin's final secret within the school. Amasta craned his neck to take in the weathered surface of the door, trying to discern its top, but the strain left his neck aching, and he had no success. Having weathered countless storms, Dumbledore's interest in what lay beyond the door was evident. He approached the stone portal, his long, aged hand tracing its surface, as if trying to sense it through some magical perception. Yet the door, wrought by Slytherin himself, blocked all detection. Even a wizard of Dumbledore's caliber could not discern what lay beyond without opening it. "Do you think Tom Riddle ever came here?" Amasta stepped back a few paces. If even Dumbledore couldn't perceive beyond the door, there was no point in forcing the attempt. "Yes, I believe he did, Amasta." Dumbledore moved closer, his piercing blue eyes focused on a small brown stain on the wall, and said calmly, "Clearly, he was unable to open this door either. But isn't this the chamber that Slytherin left for his heir? If he could open it—" Harry, trying not to interrupt Dumbledore and Amasta's observations, couldn't help but speak. Though the stone door was impressive, it lacked the awe of the vast cavern they had just crossed. Yes, it's certainly strange. For some reason, Dumbledore looked somewhat troubled. Then Harry noticed something new. A line of text carved into the stone wall to the right of the door. He spoke up again. "Only those of pure blood may open this door." Amasta read it quietly, then smirked. "Seems very much in Slytherin's style." "I don't think it's that simple, Amasta. If you don't believe me, we can test it." A glint of light flickered in Dumbledore's eyes. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing his left arm. "Headmaster Dumbledore!" Harry immediately understood what Dumbledore intended. He hurried forward and also rolled up his sleeve. "You can use mine." "Oh, thank you." Dumbledore smiled kindly, "But according to Slytherin's specifications, I believe that of the three of us here, only I meet the requirement." A silver light flashed through the air, and Dumbledore's arm sprayed a streak of deep crimson across the rough stone door. Dark, glimmering beads of blood splattered over the surface, but under the influence of some mysterious magic, they didn't fall to the ground. Instead, they rolled swiftly toward the nearly invisible crack running down the center of the door. Whoosh! After Dumbledore's blood was drawn in, a faint turquoise smoke burst from the narrow fissure, and then silence fell once more. Harry looked as if he couldn't quite accept the outcome, yet Dumbledore and Amos remained calm. "Why do you think this is the result, Headmaster Dumbledore?" Amos asked, though his expression suggested he already had his own theory. "We can only guess." Dumbledore glanced at Harry, weighing his words carefully. "Slytherin's idea of pure blood seems to differ from our understanding. Most likely, he meant his own descendants." "But Voldemort failed," Harry blurted out. "The diary told me that Voldemort is a descendant of Slytherin, but he realized then that Tom Riddle had explained how the Slytherin blood in his veins came through his mother, while his father was a muggle. The three of them stood in silence by the stone door. Harry felt uneasy seeing both Dumbledore and Amos unable to solve the puzzle of the door. It implied that this rare adventure might have ended in failure unless they could somehow locate Voldemort's cousins or other blood relatives. Harry could tell from Dumbledore and Amos's conversation that some extraordinary secrets were being discussed, though he didn't understand a word of it. Amos rubbed his hair in frustration and looked at Dumbledore. "Do you think it's possible?" "Hard to say, Amos." Dumbledore frowned, clearly understanding the fragmented question. "But I believe only theoretically is it possible. Physically or spiritually, it is highly unlikely." He turned to stare deeply at the Slytherin statue, letting out a long, heavy sigh. "I sincerely hope the day never comes when we are forced to open this stone door. But if that day does arrive, oh, it would be the most vexing challenge of my later life." That night, many troubles were resolved, yet many more had been sown, lying dormant to erupt in the future. Dumbledore instructed Harry to go to the infirmary for Madame Pomfrey's checkup. Though Harry insisted he had suffered no serious injuries, Dumbledore remained firm. I know you have many questions, Harry, but now is not the time for them. After you've had proper rest, you may come to my office and we will talk. But the Board of Governors, Harry, surprised, looked toward Dumbledore in the entrance hall. You've already handled it? Of course. Dumbledore smiled gently, looking at Harry with warmth. In fact, I was warned long ago about Lucius Malfoy's scheming. I suspect that by tomorrow morning, when Lucius discovers I am still headmaster, he will storm in to argue with me. Harry ran upstairs, no longer resisting the trip to the infirmary, remembering that Ron and Hermione were also there. He couldn't wait to share what had happened that night. I'm sorry, Amos. I know you need rest, Dumbledore said apologetically, looking at him. But could I trouble you to sit and talk with an old man who doesn't need much sleep? Amos felt a chill run through him. He knew that the truly difficult problems were about to begin. Chapter 90, Everything, Part 1. Subscribe, please. Emerald willow branches swayed in the cool late-night breeze, and the moonlight glinted off the rippling surface of the lake. Except for the infirmary, Hogwarts was dark, yet the castle radiated a cheerful, peaceful energy once more. The clouds that had blanketed the castle at dusk had long since vanished. Dumbledore and Amostar walked side by side along the lakeshore, neither speaking, simply savoring the rare tranquility of the moment. The matter of the chamber has been resolved, Headmaster Dumbledore. I fear I will soon have to depart, Amostar said. 5 minutes later, he stopped beneath a crooked willow, gazing at the rippling lake, quietly sorting through the complex emotions stirring within him. Not considering staying, Amostar? Dumbledore's tone held no surprise, but his aged features betrayed genuine regret. In my eyes, you are an exceptional professor. You have adapted well to this school, and the young witches and wizards admire you. If it were possible, I would not wish to lose such a talented educator. Amostar smiled but said nothing. He trusted that Dumbledore could likely guess his choice. The headmaster looked more fatigued than at any point this semester. He let the topic drop. A lifetime of experience had taught him what could and could not be changed. Dumbledore saw such matters more clearly than anyone. Then, Dumbledore produced the tattered diary he had brought from the chamber. Moonlight caught a single droplet of water, sending it arching through the air to land precisely on the diary, leaving a clear mark. I suppose you've already recognized what this is, Amostar? Oh, Headmaster Dumbledore, you may overestimate me a bit. I know nothing of Horcruxes, Amostar replied with a playful wink at the headmaster. Trying to hide anything from Dumbledore, a man with unmatched life experience and a master of legilimency, was nearly impossible, but Amostar used humor to convey that he didn't wish to discuss Horcruxes further. Let's leave it at that, then. Dumbledore returned the diary to his pocket and drew a deep breath, gazing toward the edge of the endless forest and the small cabin whose lights had dimmed. There is one matter, Amostar, that I fear you cannot pretend to be unaware of. His tone grew more serious. I wish for you to return the serpent from the chamber to me. A strong wind swept across the lake, slapping the shoreline and tossing Amostar's neatly combed gray hair into a chaotic dance. He pressed a hand to his head and let out a heavy sigh, the sound of the wind amplifying it. Dumbledore, of course, had not killed the serpent. A clumsy lie could not deceive him. Amostar even suspected that the headmaster's unique gaze had already seen the serpent lying in his arms. Amostar had only said he wanted to keep the serpent to let Dumbledore know his intention. He thought that having resolved the chamber's crisis, the headmaster would not refuse such a minor request. I hope you can understand my difficulty, Amostar, Dumbledore said, a hint of exasperation in his voice at Amostar's stubborn expression. Hagrid is currently imprisoned in Azkaban. I must present evidence to the Ministry to prove that the attacks on young witches and wizards 50 years ago and recently were not the work of Aragog, the spider Hagrid keeps. The diary has been destroyed, and Voldemort's Horcruxes are hardly suitable as evidence. The serpent, however, provides solid proof. Amostar's expression darkened. Truthfully, he had not considered Hagrid. The situation was delicate. As Dumbledore's most loyal ally, Hagrid's imprisonment could not simply be ignored. But if Amostar surrendered the serpent, what would happen to his mission? Months of work, including sacrificing a precious voodoo doll to counter Voldemort's curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, would be wasted. No, that was absolutely unacceptable. Dumbledore read his silence and continued. This serpent must be handed over to the ministry regarding the 2 attacks on young witches and wizards last semester. Cornelius ordered the Daily Prophet to remain silent.